Welcome to the Flight Club Podcast, a woman's guide to leaning out. We give you a behind-the-scenes look at business launch and growth through the stories of successful female entrepreneurs. Here's your host, Felina Hansen, founder and CEO of Hera Hub.
Hello and welcome. I am excited for my conversation today with Diana Lowe. She is a certified executive coach, and she focuses on helping technology leaders deepen their emotional intelligence and communication skills to inspire their teams to higher performance levels, creatively solve problems, and positively impact their bottom line. Diana works with directors and senior executives in Fortune 500 companies to transform their team spirit and communication, turning low-performing teams into highly productive and engaged teams. Her practice focuses on using evidence-based research in positive psychology for coaching, which allows her a whole person wellness approach in coaching. She calls San Diego, California home. And when she's not playing with her two little girls or hanging out with her hubby, you can see her on stage doing stand-up comedy, which I absolutely love. Welcome to the show today, Diana.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me.
Before we dive in and go into your background, have you been missing doing stand-up the last year with COVID?
Do you know, I was going to do it again last year, and it's just something I do for fun, actually.
Okay.
And I can't wait till we can be in a place where we're, safer around people. But yeah, I am missing it. It's my my Everest that I climb at least once a year to get myself out of my comfort zone. So yeah.
I love that. That's awesome. Good stuff.
Thanks.
Well, let's go back. Tell us briefly, where are you from? Talk a bit about education, and then we'll wind along your career path.
Sure. So I grew up in the lovely Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and it was a wonderful existence. And as I was moving out of my house and figuring out my life as an adult, I decided to go to Pennsylvania State University, Penn State, for those Nittany Lion fans out there. And Penn State was amazing. It was really where I got my my worldview. I got to study abroad several times. And at the end of my time there, I decided that I wanted to work abroad. And that really takes us to the next part of our conversation, where I moved to London after I graduated university.
Awesome. And why did you make that decision, Diana?
You know, it's interesting because I had, and I think a lot of people can identify this, as a child, you have dreams implanted for you by well-meaning people. So I had a dream to work in finance around the world. I thought that would be such an amazing life to live. So I thought, what better place to start than London?
I love it. Yes, absolutely. Awesome. And it probably, I know for myself, I went to Spain during college. And for me, it was just the finding myself, right? Like being away from everything and everybody and really having to stand on your own 2 feet. Was that part of the equation as well for you?
It was. And I really felt like through college, I had more of that experience because I lived in Australia while I was in college for a little bit. I studied abroad in the Netherlands, and I also studied abroad in Mexico. So I felt very self-sufficient by the time I had graduated because I had lived and worked abroad. And so I thought London wasn't too far off of those other countries in terms of they at least spoke the same language, my mother tongue.
That's awesome. So where did you start off your career as far as, industry and work?
So I started in finance, and at Penn State when I went, you needed to have an internship. So my final year, I got an internship with Mellon Financial. And I was really, when I found out they had an office in London, I was like, okay, I got to get there. So I used the very limited intranet that they had back then to start networking within the company. And I asked if they would sponsor me to move over there. And I knew they wanted to keep me. because I did a great job. And, they said, we can't sponsor you, but if you can get yourself over there, we can give you a job. So I said, okay, got to figure out how to get over there. And at the time they had visas for students who wanted to work abroad. And I found the visa, and this is before the internet. So
I know, I love these conversations. You're like pre-internet.
Yeah. And I don't know how I actually did it, but I found this visa to work abroad for 6 months. And it was, I don't even remember, I think it was free for students. And I applied and I got it. And lo and behold, I got a plane ticket and I moved there. And they did have a job for me when I was there, like when I moved over.
That's amazing. I love that. Awesome. So talk a bit about your experience there. Did you love finance? Did you love the UK?
So it's all a mix of feelings. So like I said before, I had a dream implanted in me, whether it's society or my parents or whatnot. And as I started my career in finance, it was rough. My bosses were rough. I spent almost every day crying, and not because I missed home, but because it was kind of like working on Wolf of Wall Street, and I was a lamb. Yeah. So it was an interesting time because although it was hard, I'm very grateful for that time because I grew up a lot, and I realized I started to work on my own self doing extracurriculars and public speaking. And had I not have done that, I wouldn't have found what I love to do today. So it's a part of the journey. I did love London. It's great when you're in your 20s and you're there and you're working, you're making money, you meet people. So London was an amazing experience, and working in finance was tough. But sometimes when you have the worst situations, you can use that to create value. And I thought to myself, and this is like pre what I do right now, man, I really wish I could change this culture. Or I really wish my boss knew how his behavior was and how it was affecting me or other people. It was a very toxic culture that I worked in. And that's a hard thing when I was so bright-eyed and bushy-tailed, So it was interesting, but I learned a lot and I grew a lot. And, each stepping stone is an important part of the journey. So,
yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So talk a bit about this transition from finance, so senior financial analyst role, and getting into speaking, and then this transition back to the US. I see you kind of straddle between the UK and was it Austin as well? Was that where you landed when you came back?
Yeah, that's right. So I was in this really difficult financial job, and I decided I'm no quitter, Felina. So I was like, they are not going to make me quit. I'm going to keep going. So I rolled my visa over to Ireland, and I worked in finance in London and in Dublin. And I kept this going. And at this time, I met a really great guy, and, my personal life sprouted in that sense. But I realized that I really loved the extracurricular, which was the public speaking, and I was good at it. Not to say that I wasn't good at finance, but not in the same way, right? So I decided that I really loved working with people, whereas in finance, I was working with spreadsheets and numbers, and it was just a mismatch for my personality and my talents. So as I started winning public speaking competitions, doing more events in the public speaking arena, I was like, I really have to do this. So that's kind of where the transition took place. I had seen so much success outside of work that I realized, I should be paying attention to this success. And so I created my own company when I was in London, really, again, helping tech people with their people skills. That's what we called it back then. Yeah. And just networking and like maximizing their own people skills. So I did that for a while. And somewhere in there, Felina, I did a round the world trip with my then fiance, now my husband.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So I got to work in Japan and live there, and work in Australia and travel around the world. And then we decided to move back to London, and I did my company there. And then moving stateside, my family all lived in Texas at the time. So we went where the family was. Yeah.
That's awesome. That's awesome. And the same gentleman is now your husband, I presume?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
okay.
he made it and I made it. So we did it.
That's awesome. I love it. That's so great. What was that transition like for the two of you coming back? Where is he from originally, and how was it for you coming back stateside?
He was from the UK, or he is still from the,
Yeah,
from the UK.
I gotcha.
Now he's an American citizen, and I actually became a British citizen while I was over there because we were over there for 8 years.
Yeah.
And I see myself personally as like a global citizen. So wherever I am and my wardrobe is,
I like that statement. That's good.
Wherever my wardrobe is really home at that point. So I want to contribute to society as a whole. And it's hard because a European mind frame versus a Japanese versus Australian, they all have their own societies and how they do things. So it's a stretch for my brain in certain times, and depending on what I'm doing, there are certain rules that are unspoken that you follow and certain spoken rules that you follow. But I think that's a part of being global, is really embracing that difference and appreciating it.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and I can imagine the work you're doing now around emotional intelligence. I mean, that must come in awfully handy to have such a diverse background and understanding different cultures. So this transition from finance into public speaking and training, talk a little bit about, I know you were working with ASTD, the Association of, help me out, I spaced it.
Yeah, it's now, no, that's okay. It's now ATD, which is the Association of Talent Development.
Thank you. Yeah. Talk a bit about your work there, and then, ultimately what had you transition? I know you were at Dale Carnegie for quite some time, so talk about your work there as well.
Sure. So I really loved, I'm a people person. So I really love putting in extra time and learning new things. So with ATD, I ran SIG groups, and SIG groups are really about helping our members develop in certain skills, and so they can really focus on developing themselves right outside of their work. And for me, it's all about networking and meeting people and creating value in community. So, which is really why I love Hera Hub, and that's just from my own self. It's really about creating value for those around us. So I did that. And while I was doing that, I was working for Dale Carnegie. And again, Dale Carnegie is so profoundly simple and so profoundly needed to really win friends and influence people, especially in this day and age. So really, that was my first connection with emotional intelligence, but they don't call it that, right? Yeah. So they have their own terminology. But really, when we are working on being more self-aware, others aware, that's really the foundation of emotional intelligence and those behaviors that are productive.
Yeah, absolutely. Honestly, one of my favorite books that I read probably in college and read again as, a young adult, How to Win Friends and Influence People. I mean, it's such a classic, and I love it. So that's so awesome that you worked with their team. What ultimately then brought you to San Diego?
That's a really good question. I never know how to answer that. I think like Austin was really hot and it was amazing and lovely.
Fair enough.
But my family had moved from there at that point, and we wanted to be closer to family, and my family's in Phoenix. So we thought, my husband's from a beach town, obviously, because he's in England, and everywhere it's like a beach everywhere because it's an island. But he said, as we grow our family, let's move to a town that has a beach. And we scoured the United States, and we really loved San Diego. So we came to visit here, and Okay. We like
and never left, and moved your wardrobe with you.
Yeah, I moved my wardrobe. That's the most important key thing.
Awesome. We'll talk about the building of your business, if you will, Diana. Over the last 4 or so years, I've had the pleasure of getting to know you here at Hera Hub. And when you said initially some of the work you were doing was pre-internet, I'm like, girl, you are like 30 years old. What are you talking about? But anyways,
I wish I was 30, but if you believe that, I am totally in.
Seriously thought you were like 30 years old. So
I will be 40 this year.
Amazing. Yeah, my goodness. Great. Well,
40 years young.
Yes, indeed. Awesome. Talk about, you've been working for Carnegie. You've been, obviously doing teaching and training on your own for quite some time at that point. What was it just a natural sort of flow to say, hey, I'm starting, I'm going to start new here in San Diego, but continue, doing my own thing, running my own business?
That's really interesting because I don't know if I'm allowed to say this, but I trained with Tony Robbins' team to be a coach for them.
Oh, yeah. You can say that. Why not?
I know
loads of people who've taught with or have worked for Tony Robbins, actually, quite a few here at Hera Hub. So I'll have to make some intros for you. It's funny, it's not on your LinkedIn profile. It's very incog here.
And it's because I never actually, I worked through the process and then it just didn't work out, and that's okay. But at the time that I was doing that, I had found this social and emotional intelligence certification, and I was like, it was like a lightning bolt, Felina. It was like, this is it. It's like when you find the love of your life, you're like, oh, there it, So like, it was just like everything started making sense. The whole like having series and series of really negative bosses. And I was like, I want to change this. I don't know how. The introduction of Dale Carnegie and like seeing people change, and not really, we used principles then and they still do, but it wasn't quite enough. So I was always underlying searching, like, how can I create value? Like what more can I do? And I feel like I lost the question, so I'm sorry if I kind of go off.
No, not at all. Yeah, just was was the idea when you landed in San Diego, you're like, I've worked, you had kind of been in and out of, building your own business for quite some time. You did that over in the UK. And was that a natural, progression of just saying, you know what, I've landed in San Diego, I'm going to continue building my own brand versus going to get another job, so to speak?
And that it was kind of a struggle because as I have a young family, there's always a case of like, do I work or do I do my own thing? And I did apply for jobs, and ultimately I really wanted to work in emotional intelligence. And the truth is, at the time, and even now, there aren't many jobs in emotional intelligence, but I feel like so in alignment, like, so like, this is my mission, my heart song, my raison d'etre. I said that terribly, but
I gotcha.
but I feel like there is no other thing that my experience, my filters that are more fitted for this meaningful and important work, especially at this time. So I did look for jobs and I did look for things, but nothing panned out, and that's okay, because then I realized, what, I have to do something. Yeah. So as I started my business, that was your original question. Business is, I kind of call myself like an accidental entrepreneur because I never really thought about it like many people think about it, like, oh, I'm going to set this business, I'm going to do this. I was just like, I'm just going to do something I love. Right. So as I did something that I love, I'm like, oh, I kind of need to make it legal. So I'm like, okay, so like, how am I going to make this legal? And then I'm learning. So there's still so much more I'm learning, but I tried a couple of different things, and, I got some results, but it wasn't quite right. And it's a series of trial and error. Like I kind of want a silver bullet. And I think that's like with most people, they just want to know that they're doing something and it works. But it's trial and error, and that's hard. Like, I don't know if that's probably hard for a lot of people, but I feel like that's really hard for me. So once I started saying like getting a better view of when something doesn't work, it's not like a failure. It's just like, okay, this didn't work, but what could work? So for me, it was like challenging my own limiting beliefs inside of myself, because I know that this is my Rubik's cube is now aligned. So that's what I like to think of it like all the sides are now the right color. So where do I need to place this Rubik's cube? I don't know. That's a weird analogy, but
no, I love that analogy. I haven't heard that before. It's very elegant actually, and very apropos for the fact that you working with technology leaders. So So I want to talk about that just a bit more, Diana. What was the sort of key to tip the business for you into something that was, really revenue generating, where you're like, this is really starting to click together? What did you do differently that made that happen?
And that's a really good question, because I think that it's something that we've talked offline about a lot. I stopped getting in my own way.
I can see that.
Yeah. I decided that it was okay that I didn't know everything. And I decided that I am, like we talked about this, I am determined enough to keep going. And I am smart enough to figure it out. And I am aligned enough to know that it feels right. So like, and especially with emotional intelligence, a big part of that is understanding your own internal feelings and being able to decide, what does this feeling mean for the decision I'm going to be making? Obviously, we don't do it like that because it happens in a split second. But when you feel aligned, you move towards it. And I think, like, where can I apply my skills and my talent where it'll really make a difference? And I do work with more than just tech leaders, but just being able to be the solution finally, as opposed to being a part of this problem that I see. That is a satisfying feeling, because then it's more than it's just a business. Like, for example, I could start a t-shirt business, and for me, it would just be just a business, but this has meaning. This has,
absolutely. And all your experience leading up to this, I'm sure really plays into, how you coach and how you advise and how you work with companies. Can you give us an example, Diana, of, a client or a company that you're either working with now or have worked with recently that could kind of illustrate, and you don't have to name names, obviously, but just to give our listeners kind of a sense of what you're doing with these companies?
Sure. So I'll keep it fairly general so that, so not to
peg
anyone.
Yes, of course. Yeah, no, I understand.
But oftentimes in companies, the desire is to be profitable, and you hire people in who are great technically, and you say, oh, wow, they're really good. And they keep excelling. And then they put them in a place that they're no longer excelling. So there is a leader who is either creating a problem, they're unhappy with their job because they're not excelling, or they're not challenged, or quite frankly, they don't have the emotional restraint or emotional regulation or emotional discipline to hide their frustrations. Not like we should hide our frustrations, but in some way, their stress is truly affecting the job. And the type of people I work with, they're at a point where they recognize that, hey, this stress is either creating high turnover or losing us money because we're missing deadlines, or it could be a number of things. But really, they're at a point where they're like, I don't know what to do now. And the reason a lot of them get to this point is because they don't know the symptoms leading up to this disastrous, costly problem. So they either quit their job or the company fires them. And that's like ultra simple way. So like if somebody isn't performing, you either fire them, or you maybe pretend to invest in them, but it's not going to work. So you kind of push them out after that, or they quit. And I see that time and time again. But really the answer is it's so simple. It's feedback.
Mm-hmm.
And when I'm coaching with a client or with a team, for example, once they understand, number one, how they communicate, number two, the gaps in perception, because everybody thinks they're doing a great job. But if you don't get the proper feedback and it's timely, then you don't know that you're making blunders or that you're creating the problem. So a lot of the people I work with, they call me and they go, my team isn't really performing and I don't know how to get them. And they're never going to say, Felina, they're just never going to say, it's me.
Yeah, of course.
I'm not doing something right.
Yes,
so, it starts with like my team isn't doing this, or sometimes like an HR person will call me and say, this person isn't performing. And really what it comes back to is getting a clear picture on what great performance looks like. And you can't do that without feedback. So that's really what I do. And I have a couple of different programs to help just educate people on what emotional intelligence is, because it's kind of vague. If you say it, people kind of understand it.
They're like dog tilt head to the side, kind of like.
Yeah, they're like, oh yeah, I know what emotions are and I know what intelligence. But really it's about productive states and productive behaviors. And just being open to having those feedback conversations. So we run these programs and they get feedback. They have more than enough numbers. And Felina, I will tell you, somebody could tell you that you're doing something wrong 1,000 times, but when there's something about seeing it on paper with numbers in a measurable sense that they go, oh yeah.
Yeah, so, that's a good point. Absolutely.
So yeah, that feedback, really having those graphs and those numbers to show you. And I actually have a tool that shows you how much this quote unquote bad behavior costs your company. So it's like putting the numbers to that, that person or that team. And it used to be seen as like something nice and fluffy.
Yeah.
But it's not. These are important skills. And I think about the future of when my kids are at work, they're not going to stay there for money, because by that time they may have streams on their YouTube or whatever streams of income to work.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah. Well, that's a good illustration. I appreciate that. So what are you most excited about this year, Diana? What are you looking forward to most in your business and future growth?
Yeah, I think this is an exciting year, because as we come out of the COVID mentality and try to find some sort of normal, it will take time. I think emotional intelligence and even like DEI, I think people are starting to become more aware that things can change. And that's exciting for me, because emotional intelligence is like top of mind right now. Whereas before it wasn't so much, but now it's like, well, how do I deal with leading my team in a remote way? How do I build that? Because we don't have spaces that we can physically stand and talk anymore. Or I'm tired of Zoom. I don't want to connect on Zoom. So how do I do that? So I think there's going to be more issues about how to reassimilate to this new state as we go towards maybe pre-COVID. And I'm not sure if we'll get there soon, but hopefully.
I agree with you. I think the game has changed. We've seen, many companies have seen that they can work remote, and they're going to really need the tools to make that effective. You don't just slap a remote label on something and it works, right? I mean, it's a whole different change and shift how people work together. So yeah, I see big opportunity in that for you in the industry.
And I think a lot of people are, and I think of it like a laptop leader. So they are leading a team, but they don't really know what that means in terms of what that looks like in a remote sense. So some people have been doing it for a while, but some people are brand new to this. And, when something's brand new and you're past the age of, let's say 30, you don't want to admit that you don't know how to do something, because you're like, oh, I know how to do everything. So it's just a new phase for people to kind of figure out, now, how do I lead, and how do I create, how do I influence, how do I create that unity now that I'm not maybe going to see you? And so that's an EI that's a prime EI skill.
Love it, love it, love it. Awesome. Well, Diana, if our listeners want to get in touch with you, what's the best way for them to do that?
That's pretty simple. You can go to my website, which is dianalowe.com, and that's DIANALOWE.com. And there's a contact form, so you can contact me there, or hi@dianalowe.com. You can email me.
Perfect. Awesome. Thank you so much for your time, Diana.
Yeah, thank you so much, Felina. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for joining this week's episode of Flight Club, sponsored by Hera Hub. We look forward to sharing more success stories with you soon.